So the next video is going to be about carb ups. What are they? Why are they appealing? Why are they effective or not effective? And our takes on carb ups while following a ketogenic lifestyle. Ladies first again. Actually, with the ladies, I really want to talk about. I can't speak to my menstrual cycle, y'all. I can't do it.
So, not in touch with it.
Are you?
No.
So we can't help here. But the ladies, one of the biggest arguments for carb ups in females on keto is to help regulate their cycle. So speak to that if you would.
You want to start with that?
Let's just dive in.
All right, let's go.
Yeah.
I would say, in general, my cycle on keto has been much more regular. I have PCOS, polycystic ovarian condition, or syndrome now. I guess they call it syndrome. I'm old. So my cycle on keto is very regular and not a big deal. Whereas before, it was sort of irregular and kind of a pain. And so I don't want to make that worse. So I used to be a 365 day a year carb up, right? Like my life was a carb up. And that didn't work so well on my hormones. And but being 100% keto, zero carb ups, hormonally has been like a godsend for me. And for the most part, I have never worked with somebody who wasn't improved by staying keto. And maybe their keto might have needed some adjusting in terms of, getting enough fat because one of the things, if somebody's really hormonally damaged, I do find they might need to be really sort of therapeutic about their keto for a while, rather than being 100% focused on just a fat loss goal, but being more focused on how do I heal my hormones. And I have yet to see healing hormones being assisted by it adding more carbs.
I don't have PCOS, but I have Hashimoto's. I have to say it that way. I don't know why.
Okay, you go there.
Really
Dr. Hashimoto would approve.
Hashimoto. Okay, so I don't carb up with my cycles. I don't understand that rationale, but I can say that PMDD is something that I had, and keto definitely took care of that. You can't say that that's not related to hormones. Like your fluctuation in your emotional cycle goes right along with that. And I don't think adding carbs would have helped that. I think that was kind of what helped in general, was the taking away of all the carbs. So why would I go backwards and add in what was originally causing the problem in the first place? That rationale does not click with me. That doesn't make any sense.
Because a lot of people will say for women, if your keto isn't working, it's because women need more carbs. I've heard it over and over and over again. And I would like someone to give me an explanation for that actually makes sense, because I have yet to hear one.
Yeah, it sounds very compelling. It's like, oh, okay, well, women are different. Yeah, that's true.
We're special.
And so we, maybe so, right? And so you guys may know I'm a student of medicine, of course, but also of anthropology. And I've looked very, very hard at the medical research, trying to understand this carb up logic. And I can't find any research that supports it whatsoever. Your liver is perfectly capable of mobilizing glycogen if you need it. It can make glucose if you need it. And so I can't find any physiological reason that women would need to have a carb up that men wouldn't need to have. And I also can't find any rationale that some people say, oh, if you have hypothyroidism or Hashimoto's or any of the different, if you have a thyroiditis, you need to carb up for your thyroid health. I can't find any medical research or rationale.
Would some of that be a misunderstanding of the T3 issue?
Right. Just because your TSH or your T3 move one direction or another doesn't necessarily mean that you're harming your thyroid or you're degrading your thyroid health. And so the other leg of where I stand is anthropology, looking at the past, right? Looking at our ancestors. 10,000, 20,000 years ago, did women did they have to eat more carbs at certain times of the month, or did they have to do a carb up? And I can't find any reason that they would have had to do that, or any evidence that they did do that. And so the only evidence that we can see, from the kind of anthropology and the archaeological stuff, is that women would get the liver, or they would get the fat, the brain. They would get that, especially if they were going to get pregnant or were pregnant. They would get more fat. Is what it looks like they got. Nobody went and got them special carbs to have, and so I can't find any evidence to support the carb up theory. But I would say maybe there is some subset of women who does feel better with a carb up. And if so, just remember, you can do your carb up with Brussels sprouts or broccoli. You don't have to break keto to eat a few extra carbs if you feel like it helps you.
Some people do well on higher vegetable keto,
right.
And their system, as opposed to what we were talking about before, they do better with more vegetables in their...
And I think that's ancestrally appropriate for a certain subset of the population. But that doesn't mean you in any way need to cycle those carbohydrates. You just might need a vegetable-heavy keto.
So I have worked with a few anorexic clients, and I had to get them to eat more carbohydrates so that they were actually hungrier. And I wonder if a lot of people, this is just me guessing right now, but a lot of people who think they need a carb up are just chronically undereating.
Perhaps.
So it might be that a carb up, the next day they wake up hungrier, they start eating a little more food because they were overly satiated.
They're still subconsciously trying to portion control or calorie control.
Right.
When you shouldn't be doing that with keto.
Right. And so I do know some people with thyroid issues can get into trouble when they chronically undereat. And so it might not be the carbs. It might actually be that they, in response to the carbs, eat more. I wonder if there's something in there.
Excellent idea. Yeah, and then they may eat the proper amount of food that they should have been eating all along and then feel better and then think it was the carbs that did it.
Exactly.
But all the carbs did was enhance their appetite.
Which, on the other hand, many people are happy not to have happen and not be hungrier.
Right. So I think it's an interesting theory, but I can't find any medical research or anthropological evidence to support carb ups as a thing that women need.
Right. I mean, in the bodybuilding community, right, it's a thing.
Oh yeah, it's the thing in the bodybuilding community. Everybody's under the impression that you have to have carbs in order to fill out, to get stronger, to build muscle, and to recover, but that's the farthest thing from the truth. I mean, I can see a benefit to carbing up if you're not truly adapted to ketosis, because then, like, if you do a ketogenic diet and you're not really feeling the fullness that you had when you were on carbs, and then you introduce carbs, you're gonna get that back, and you're gonna feel better, you're gonna feel stronger, you're gonna have more energy, and you're gonna feel like the carbs are the reason why. But if you allow yourself to get truly into ketosis, which doesn't happen overnight, it doesn't happen over the course of a week or even months, but after a couple of years, you're truly there, there's only going to be adverse reaction to the carbs. Like, if you've been adapted for a long time and you have a whole bunch of carbs to carb up, you're going to get sick, you're going to have like water retention, it's just not going to be good. But if you allow yourself to get deeply into ketosis like that, that becomes a new norm, and you're able to fill out, have vascularity, have strength and endurance that, in my opinion, exceeds that of which I had when I was eating carbs, and I don't even have to introduce that as a variable. So I can basically, do what I know works and not have to introduce a crazy unknown factor into my routine, and then I just feel much better for it. I don't have to breach what I know is working for my body. But most people's problem with that is they don't let themselves get deeply enough adapted to be able to tap into the true potential of what keto does from a performance standpoint. They just do it for a week or two or a month and then decide that they want to introduce carbs because somebody gets in their ear and says you got to have carbs, and then it basically just short circuits the cycle and they can't really reach the full potential.
Excellent. Yeah, it's a great point. And so even from a bodybuilding standpoint, once you're fat adapted, truly fat adapted, you really don't find any useful purpose for any kind of carbs, preloading or carb ups or any of that kind of stuff.
None whatsoever. I get better recovery with keto. I mean, it's anti-inflammatory, so I can train hard. Before, I would eat carbs, and I'd go do legs, for instance, and then my joints, not my muscles, but my joints would be hurting so bad that I could not hit another leg day for a week. now my muscles fatigue, but my joints are fine. Like I could do legs day after the next if I wanted to, and that's because the anti-inflammatory effects. And from like a volumizing effect of the muscle, like this last competition I did, I didn't carb up. That's the thing to do, especially contest prep peak week. You carb up the night before the show. I didn't carb up. I fatted up. I ate a whole bunch of fat the night before, and my skin was thinner. I had more vascularity. I filled out because that's what my body was used to, and I gave it a surplus of it, so it just soaked it up. That's what happens when people are eating carbs when that's their norm. But if you remove that from your norm and your norm becomes keto, the same thing applies. And you don't have to worry about the water retention because you're not going to have the water retention.
Right.
So it's like more benefit and less downside. Bless you.
Thank you.
Any other points of interest?
No, that's a good. The sneeze is a good.
The
place.
sneeze.
Thank you. I appreciate
Yeah.
that. I appreciate that. Yeah, I tried to make it as non-loud.
Not
as
subtle at all.
possible.
We're not even talking.
You're either going to get motion or noise.
So now we can talk about allergies now.
Yeah. But what was there another thing with carb ups? Like, why? Leptin. So a lot of people will come to me and say, like, I have been told that my leptin will be screwy if I don't do a carb up. And, it's interesting because the first few times people brought this up, I was like, I need to find the science on this. I have not found the science on this.
Nor have I.
And so I actually talked to Dr. Ludwig, who talks about this quite a bit. And no, Lustig, not Ludwig. Sorry, their names are so similar. Lustig. And I was like, do you know anything behind? And he said, I don't know what you're talking about. That's ridiculous. And so I feel fairly...
And he's an endocrinologist.
He is an endocrinologist.
Right. So he would know.
And he talks about leptin. And I feel fairly confident at this point that there's not real good science about that requirement. And I think it comes from just a really big misunderstanding of what leptin does and is.
Yeah, I agree. And I think when you look at the anthropology, there are whole populations of humans who lived at the northern latitudes. There was no opportunity for a carb up, but yet somehow their leptin remained stable. They were able to have a normal cycle. They were able to reproduce, and they were able to raise those children. So at that point, it becomes like, well, how were they genetically special? The Inuit, if you lived in northern Russia, if you lived in the Scandinavian countries, how did they? I mean, their leptin somehow remained within normal limits, and they were able to function and reproduce and raise their children. So at that point, there's no ancestral argument for that, and I can't find any research that backs up the leptin argument for carbs. So again, we come up empty when we try to find some black and white evidence for that.
Right.
Yeah.
So when people do carb up and they supposedly notice an improvement or their cycle equalizes or whatever, is that likely more of a placebo psychological effect?
I never want to discount someone's experience.
Right.
If someone says, I do this thing, I feel better, I look better, I have better results, I'm not going to say, well, your experience is wrong, right?
Yeah.
And at the same time, what I see overwhelmingly is people coming to me and saying, I was told that this would help. I'm not noticing it helping, and I'm frustrated. And so when I have a ton of evidence in this hand and none in this one, except for maybe a few isolated cases. Now, I can totally believe that some isolated cases do really well with more carbs. There's a certain percentage of the population that their system runs great on carbs. I just find overwhelming numbers of people who are trying it and frustrated and failing more than I find people who are like, that turned everything around for me.
Yeah, and it's talked about as more of a rule instead of being like, this is a thing, you could try it, see how you feel.
Right.
It's talked about more like you should carb up if you're a girl or
Right.
a woman.
And I mean, I will honestly say I would say I would call myself generally a former food addict, but the tendrils are still there.
Right.
I can't.
Yeah.
I can't.
Yeah.
From a psychological point of view, I mean, my last carb up was, 2017, right? It's just like devastation.
Yeah.
Well, not 17, earlier than that. But you know, it for a lot of people, it is just going to be the road to ruin.
Exactly. And I would say it could be placebo, but I hate to ever hang things on that hook because that's a little disrespectful to the people who
Right.
it seems
And
to be working for.
I don't want to say. I was just
I know,
asking.
but I think it's a valid
You have
question.
been offensive.
But I hate to ever just say, oh, yeah, it's placebo.
Yeah.
No, I hate that. But at the same time, if you took someone who used to be an alcoholic and you gave him a fifth of whiskey, he's going to feel great there for a minute. But that doesn't mean that was good for him. He shouldn't have done that, right? He should have remained,
Right.
on the wagon. And so I think there's multiple reasons why it could make you feel good, but I don't think that those are potentially healthy reasons.
Yeah, I feel like the mind, the mind is going to want to believe what the mind wants to believe. So if you haven't truly adopted this as a lifestyle that you're not going into crossroads with, and you really still like your ice cream, and you hear somewhere off in the distance that it could help your cycle, then you're likely going to try that ice cream.
Right. And it may very well, this is not BS, right? Your stress levels matter. Mm-hmm. And you could make a case that if someone is really, like, the idea of a life with no more Krispy Kremes is so depressing to them that they stress out about it and focus on it and think about it. You could make an argument that for some people, the stress reduction of that is helpful, but it's sort of like, oh, yeah, like one of the things about alcohol, right? Some people say like the stress relief of alcohol is so beneficial for some people that it overcomes the toxic effects of alcohol. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't mean that everyone should be an alcoholic.
Yeah, many alcoholics use that argument.
Right, exactly.
Right? Yeah, but that doesn't mean it's a good argument.
But it may be in the right titrated I mean, you could make an argument, it's like, God, if you have to work that hard.
But if you're counting the days until you can have some ice cream or donuts again, you might have a carbohydrate problem that you need to talk to yourself and have some self-talk about.
Right.
But I find, I don't know if you find this, but during my cycle, that doing fat ups or increasing my salt intake actually provides a benefit. Right. And I just want to know, maybe, have you talked to any of your clients and told them to increase their fat macro?
Yeah, it works so well. So a lot of people, they have been told that you need chocolate during your cycle. It is a requirement. Now, I have nothing against chocolate. No, right? There are lots of keto chocolate options. Right. However, you find over time that is an idea that stops feeling true. Like by year 2 of keto, I like chocolate, but I don't need chocolate just because I have my period.
Right. And that's a weird thing to think that makes sense. What do you mean we need chocolate?
But if you're told something enough times by the chocolate industry, but I do think what I see in a lot of people is, especially early on in keto, if they increase their fat during their period or right before their period, they feel saner,
not as many
happier,
cravings.
not as many cravings, and so it absolutely can help quite a bit.
I always up the guacamole, add a lot of pink Himalayan salt to every single thing.
Yeah, you've really used that hacking strategy to really calm down your.
Because I used to eat fat snacks.
Yeah.
That was my thing. It's coming up, that time of the month.
Order some cookies.
Yeah. And one other thing I've noticed, not in my cycle, but in my clients, is that, it is pretty typical to gain some water weight.
Yeah,
it's just going to happen. Absolutely. And then when you gain that water weight, it screws with you mentally because you're trying to lose weight, you're gaining water weight, it's your cycle.
Might as well.
I need chocolate, know?
Might as well.
And it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. However, one little hack you can do, rather than reaching for Tom and Jerry, Ben and Jerry's.
Ben and Jerry's. Tom and Jerry's is good.
Tom and Jerry's is a cartoon. Is drink more water during your cycle. If you drink more water, your body's going to be less likely to retain that water, so you won't see as much of a jump in the scale, and it's not going to screw with you psychologically as much. So drink more water, stay keto, fat up, and
stay off the scale.
And I also don't even bother. Just don't even bother. Don't do that
to yourself.
It's just not. I mean,
It's not your friend.
It's not your friend. But at the same time, one thing I have noticed in clients is the fewer carbs they eat, the less water weight they gain in their cycle.
Oh, 100%.
And that's because you keep your insulin level so much lower, and insulin's intimately related to water retention.
Right.
Intimately.
Yeah, and I've noticed my carnivore clients, they don't even notice the scale moving hard, like even, like more than a half pound.
Right.
It's very low. So that seems also to come into play.
So did we talk about carb ups or did we talk about cycles in this episode?
I don't know.
A little,
Yes,
a little
yes,
of
we
both.
did.
Little of this, little of that.
Like we covered some.
You
information.
started with the cycle thing.
Yeah,
I
This was
know,
all your
I'm
fault.
guilty. I'm guilty.
We could do many videos on.
There's not enough videos
Cycles.
about it.
We just do videos all night long, y'all. Any other points on this one?
That's good. Yeah.
That's good.
That's it. That's we got it. We covered it. Yeah.
All right, we covered it.